welcome to the Anti-Heroism module. And in this module, I'm going to start out by giving you a couple of examples, one from the Iliad and one from the Odyssey, of how heroes who are otherwise generally valued for their excellence, which of course is literally their goodness, how these heroes, Achilles in the Iliad and Odysseus in the Odyssey, are shown very vividly to be people who also are capable of committing atrocities. And the question is going to be, well, why is that, and how does that get reflected in video games? And so it's going to be a way into a certain set of video games that are, frankly, pretty controversial these days. The one I'm going to use, because it's the most obviously controversial, is Grand Theft Auto. I'm going to use Grand Theft Auto 4, where I think we see a really interesting comparison to be made between what it is to be an anti-hero and what it is to be a hero, and whether the two are compatible. And beyond that, between anti-heroism in the ancient stuff and anti-heroism in the newer stuff. Grand Theft Auto and other games, and there are many, many of them, where you're given the opportunity to do atrocities, to do bad stuff. Okay, so here we are in book 22 of the Iliad. Achilles has just finally killed Hector, which is bad enough because we like Hector a lot. We can understand, though, that Hector killed Patroclus, and now Achilles is killing Hector. That's the way it works. But the way it doesn't usually work, or maybe we're made to think it shouldn't usually work, is what Achilles does next. If you've got the Lattimore, this is on 445, and we're at line 393 of book 22. Achilles says, "We have won ourselves enormous fame. We have killed the great Hector, whom the Trojans glorified as if he were a god in their city." He spoke, and now thought of shameful treatment for glorious Hector. In both of his feet at the back he made holes by the tendons in the space between ankle and heel, and drew thongs of oxhide through them, and fastened them to the chariot so as to let the head drag, and mounted the chariot, and lifted the glorious armor inside it, then whipped the horses to a run, and they winged their way unreluctant. A cloud of dust rose where Hector was dragged, his dark hair was falling about him, and all that head that was once so handsome was tumbled in the dust, since by this time Zeus had given him over to his enemies to be defiled in the land of his fathers. Remember that this is, of course, in front of the walls of Troy, and as this passage goes on, we see Hector's family standing on the walls and watching this happen. I don't know what you can call that if it's not an atrocity. Well, what does it mean? It seems to mean that in the course of being a hero, there are times when you do things that, from a really sane perspective, the perspective of the audience and the perspective of the bard, are atrocious and atrocities, and that in turn call into question what it means to be a hero, even what it means to be human. And the dark side, it shows that. Alright, so we'll go on to the Odyssey now. Our passage from the Odyssey is in book 22 of the Odyssey. We're on page 332 of the Lattimore translation, and we're at line 433. Odysseus has just defeated the suitors, which is in itself a kind of atrocity because of the way he massacres them. But again, just as when Achilles kills Hector, it's justifiable, it seems to us. When Odysseus kills the suitors in that massacre scenario, it's justifiable because what else could he do? He's one man against all of those suitors. But then comes this. So he spoke, and the old woman went through the palace, bringing the message to the women and urging them onward. But Odysseus, calling Telemachus and the oxherd and swineherd to him, spoke to them in winged words, saying, "Begin the work of carrying out the bodies," that is, the bodies of the suitors, "and tell the women to help, and after that to wash the beautiful chairs and tables clean with water and porous sponges. Then, after you have got all the house back in good order, lead all these maidservants." Okay, these are the maidservants that the suitors have been sleeping with, and Odysseus is saying they have to clean the entire house, and then what follows. "Lead all these maidservants out of the well-built palace between the round house and the unfaulted wall of the courtyard, and hew them with the thin edge of the sword. until you have taken the lives from all, and they forget Aphrodite, the goddess they had with them when they lay secretly with the suitors. Okay, it would not have been lost on the audience of the bards that these maidservants would not have had a choice about sleeping with the suitors. And for Odysseus to say it was Aphrodite that made them do it is a kind of bitter irony. Another thing to say is that when it finally comes to it, this is on the next page of Lattimore, and we're at line around 460, after they've cleaned it up and been herded out into the courtyard. Now the thoughtful Telemachus began speaking among them. I would not take away the lives of these creatures by any clean death, for they have showered abuse on the head of my mother and on my own head too, and they have slept with the suitors. So he spoke, and taking the cable of a dark-prowed ship, fastened it to the tall pillar and fetched it about the roundhouse, and like thrushes who spread their wings, or pigeons who have flown into a snare set up for them in a thicket, trying to find a resting place, but the sleep given them was hateful, so their heads were all in a line, and each had her neck caught fast in a noose, so that their death would be most pitiful. They struggled with their feet for a little, not for very long. I don't know what to call this if not an atrocity. It's over and above what's necessary. It shows this dark side of human nature. The question then becomes, okay, should you show that dark side of human nature? We all know it's there. Plato, as we've talked about a little bit before, and we're going to talk about more down the road, Plato thinks you should not show it, because if you show it, people are going to pretend, even just through listening to a story, pretend to be that way, and therefore they're going to become that way. Aristotle disagrees, and I go with Aristotle in this instance at least, which is to say that if you listen to this kind of thing, if you perform as a bard this kind of thing here in the Iliad or the Odyssey or in Grand Theft Auto, you learn more about what it means to be human, and within the context of culture, you learn better about how to make the right choices, how to avoid atrocities like this. And so I think what we're going to see as we cross the border from Homeric epic to video game is that it's that same idea of understanding yourself better through looking fixedly, looking without hesitation at the dark side.